No one ever expects salvation to come in the form of a grease-stained woman driving an old pickup truck. The sun scorched the pavement like it held a grudge, warping the horizon and silencing even the birds. On a desolate country road outside of Aurora City, a silver Maserati sat helpless, its hood puffing out thick clouds of steam behind the wheel. Brandon Hale, a venture capitalist with his name on half the skyscrapers in downtown Chicago, slammed his fist against the leather steering wheel in sheer disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not today. His $3,000 0-cent suit clung to his back with sweat, and the platinum watch on his wrist told him he had exactly 18 minutes before his pitch. The pitch to the International Board of Horizon Tech. The future of the company, and of his legacy, was tied to that meeting, and here he was, paralyzed by an overheating engine on a forgotten strip of highway with no reception and no clue how to fix it. He muttered a curse as he popped the hood and was immediately engulfed by smoke. He staggered back, coughing, loosening his tie, blinking at the tangled chaos of pipes and metal that mocked his powerlessness. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who moved billions with a phone call, reduced to helplessness by a busted coolant line. Then he heard it. The grumble of an old engine in the distance. A weather-beaten Ford truck rolled to a stop a few yards behind him. From the cab stepped a woman. Her jeans were worn, streaked with oil. Her flannel shirt was faded and rolled up at the sleeves. Her curly hair was pulled into a high bun that did nothing to shield her from the brutal heat. She didn't smile, didn't hesitate, just grabbed a toolbox from the truck bed and walked toward him with calm, measured steps. "You need help?" she asked, her voice low and even, like this was just another Tuesday. Brandon looked her up and down. She didn't fit the profile of the people he was used to dealing with. No badge, no clipboard, no suit. She was nobody. Just there. "I've got a meeting," he said stiffly, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "My assistant was supposed to call for help, but this place is a dead zone." The woman didn't flinch. She walked straight past him and bent over the engine. "Cooling system," she muttered, after less than 10 seconds. "You blew a hose clamp. I can rig it. It'll get you to the city, but don't push it past a few hours." He stared at her, almost offended. "Are you sure?" She looked up slowly and met his eyes with a firmness that made him feel oddly small. "I'm a mechanic," she said. "My shop's 10 miles west. You're lucky I was on a parts run." She returned to her truck and came back with a coil of tubing, zip ties, and a confidence he couldn't deny. As she worked, Brandon found himself watching her hands. They were small but strong, steady. She moved with the precision of someone who knew machines like most people know language. No wasted motion, no panic. "5 more minutes and you'd have cracked your engine block," she said, tightening something near the radiator. "These cars are fast, but fragile, like some people." Her words struck him like a passing jab, but he didn't answer. He just folded his arms and leaned against the car, caught between admiration and discomfort. "How do you know so much about engines like this?" he asked. Her voice didn't change tone. "I read, I study, I work. Excellence isn't exclusive to zip codes." He blinked. Something in her cadence, her composure. It felt familiar. When she finished and closed the hood, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "I owe you," he said, reaching for his wallet and pulling out a few crisp bills. "Here, it's the least I can do." She hesitated, only for a moment, before reaching out. And that's when he saw it. A silver ring with a deep blue sapphire, delicate and old-fashioned, wrapped around her oil-smudged finger. Brandon froze. That ring, that exact ring. His mouth went dry. A memory surged forward like a long-buried tide. A girl beneath a tree. A pinky promise sealed with a carved bird and that very ring. The last thing his mother ever gave him before she died. The girl had been his best friend. His only peace during a childhood filled with silence and guards and whispered business deals. "Where did you get that ring?" he asked, barely recognizing the sound of his own voice. The woman pulled her hand back slightly, her eyes narrowing. "It was my mother's," she said carefully. "Why?" Brandon's throat tightened. The world around him disappeared into the shimmer of heat and memory. "I gave that ring to someone a long time ago," he said softly. She stepped back, her posture suddenly guarded. "You've got a meeting to catch, mister. This road won't fix itself." She turned and walked to her truck. He didn't even ask her name, but as she started the engine, a name rushed to his lips like an old hymn from another life. "Maya?" She didn't answer. The truck pulled away and Brandon Hale, a man who had everything, stood on the side of the road, realizing he may have just met the one person he had lost forever. Brandon didn't make it to his meeting. He drove, but not toward the city. His hands gripped the steering wheel, his mind replaying the sound of Maya's voice, the way her fingers curled around that sapphire ring. It couldn't be her. It shouldn't be her. That girl had vanished from his life 20 years ago, erased like a smudge on a page, and yet there she was. Same fire in her eyes, same quiet dignity that never begged to be seen. Back at Horizon Tech, chaos erupted in boardrooms. Executives whispered about his absence, investors paced. But Brandon Hale, the man known for ruthless precision and never missing a deadline, had something far more pressing on his mind. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he pulled out a worn wooden box from the back of a closet in his penthouse. Inside lay a carved wooden bird, wings stretched wide. The carving was rough, childlike, but still whole. He held it like a confession. Then he opened his laptop and began searching for every record tied to Maya Ortega, her name etched in his mind now with stunning clarity. She had disappeared from the Open Heart Orphanage after his sudden departure all those years ago. No foster record, no adoption file, nothing. It was like someone had wiped her off the grid. Except one trail remained. Hope Auto Repair, a small, family-run shop located in a dying town called Aurora. Owner, Xavier Ortega. Nephew, Maya. He was there before sunrise. The shop was quiet, bathed in the soft gold of early morning. Brandon stepped out of his car, no suit this time, just jeans and a plain shirt. He wanted to be unseen, but he couldn't help feeling like he stood out like an open wound. Maya was under the hood of an old Ford, her hands deep in grease and focus. When she saw him, her expression didn't change, but she didn't smile either. "We're not open yet," she said flatly, wiping her hands on a rag. "I'm not here for service," Brandon replied, holding something out. In his palm lay the wooden bird. Maya's breath caught. Her eyes didn't leave the figure. She took one slow step closer, then another. That was mine," she whispered. "I gave that to me," Brandon finished. "You carved it yourself, with a pocket knife you weren't supposed to have." He tried to smile. It came out crooked. Maya didn't smile back. "You promised you'd come back," she said. "I tried," Brandon said quietly, lowering his hand. "But my father had other plans." The clang of tools behind them interrupted the silence. Xavier Ortega emerged from the garage, tall and broad-shouldered, his hair gray at the temples. His eyes flicked from Brandon to Maya, narrowing with slow recognition. "So," he said, voice like gravel, "the lost prince returns." Brandon turned toward him. "I came to explain, and to ask for a chance to make things right." Xavier crossed his arms. "Took you 20 years. "I know," Brandon admitted, "but I didn't know what happened. I only found out last night that everything I believed, the orphanage, my adoption, the land, was all a lie." At that, Maya stiffened. "What do you mean, the land?" she asked. Brandon took a deep breath. "I found a file last night, locked in my father's home office. Something called Project Aurora. It had maps, old deeds, legal documents, and a forged death certificate. For your mother." The world seemed to still. "What?" Maya's voice was a whisper now. "They faked her death," Brandon continued. "She tried to fight back when they took your family's land, the land where my father built his new headquarters." Maya took a step back, her hands trembling. "She didn't abandon me?" she asked. But it was more to herself than to him. Xavier stepped forward and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "No, Nina," he said softly. "Your mother never left you. She disappeared because she had to. Maya's eyes burned. Her voice cracked. "You knew?" "I knew enough," Xavier admitted. "But I kept it quiet until you were ready." Brandon pulled out a second folder, this one stuffed with printouts from his father's files. "There's more. Lawsuits, bribes, land seizures hidden under shell companies, all of it connected to your last name, Ortega." Maya opened the folder slowly. Her eyes scanned the pages, her breath short. This signature," she said, pointing to the bottom of a deed. "That's your father's. He signed off on the fake sale of my family's land." Brandon nodded, guilt thick in his throat. "And now he's holding an event tomorrow night, a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new headquarters, on the land he stole." Maya looked up. A fire had returned to her eyes. "Then that's where I'll tell the truth," she said. Brandon blinked. "You want to go public? In front of investors, politicians, press? I'll expose him at the height of his pride." Xavier shook his head. "It's dangerous, Maya. Ernesto Hale doesn't lose. He buries things. People. I have nothing left to lose," she said. "But I have truth, and that's more than he can say." Brandon stepped closer. "Then let me help you. I still have access to the event. I can get you on the inside." Maya hesitated. After 20 years? After abandonment, betrayal, and silence? Could she trust him again? She looked at the bird in his hand, the ring on her finger, the spark in her chest that hadn't burned this bright in years. "All right," she said. The night of the grand opening arrived with all the pomp and spectacle Ernesto Hale demanded. The new Hale Tech International Complex glowed like a crown of steel and glass, perched atop land that had once been fertile green and home to generations of the Ortega family. Now it was polished concrete, curated landscaping, and sweeping LED billboards that declared, "The future starts here." A string quartet played softly at the entrance as guests in designer gowns and tuxedos sipped champagne and posed for cameras. Politicians mingled with CEOs, investors flew in from across the world. This was not just a building, it was a message. The Hale legacy is untouchable. Brendan stood near the valet entrance, adjusting the discreet earpiece he had synced to Maya's phone. "Security will be light near the east wing," he murmured. "They only expect press and board members through the front." "I'm not worried," Maya replied. "I've faced worse than men in suits." She emerged from the passenger seat of a modest black sedan, wearing a simple navy dress. No jewels, no designer labels. Just the sapphire ring, catching the light like a quiet rebellion. Xavier stood beside her, stoic and protective. His eyes swept the venue like a man who had once fought fires and still smelled smoke. They slipped in through the employee corridor as Brandon had arranged. No questions, no second glances. In the noise and glitter of Hale's world, sometimes the quietest people moved unseen. On stage, Ernesto Hale welcomed the crowd with a dazzling smile and an expensive suit tailored to fit his ambition. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his voice calm and commanding. "For over 3 decades," he declared, "my family has invested in innovation, infrastructure, and the communities that hold us together." Maya stood just behind the curtain, heart pounding. In her hand, a folder thick with proof. Forged documents, fake signatures, suppressed court records, her mother's name on every page, erased by the man now bathing in applause. Brandon met her backstage, tension in every breath. "He doesn't know you're here," he said, "but Elise does." "Elise?" Maya asked. "My fiancé," he said, voice flat. "At least, that's what the press believes." Maya raised an eyebrow. "She's smarter than anyone gives her credit for. She found the files before I did. And she's okay with this? She's the one who said, if you're going to burn it down, do it with a crowd watching." Maya gave a small nod. The time had come. Ernesto Hale raised his champagne glass. "And now," he announced, "we dedicate this building to the next generation of creators, thinkers, and leaders." Before he could finish, the spotlight shifted. Someone had stepped onto the stage. Whispers stirred the crowd like wind across tall grass. "Maya?" Ernesto's voice cracked with disbelief. She didn't answer him. Instead, she faced the audience, her voice steady. "My name is Maya Ortega," she said, "and this building was built on stolen land. My family's land." The ballroom fell silent. Ernesto stepped forward, gripping the mic. "Security." But Maya lifted the folder and opened it. "These are deeds. Forged by Ernesto Hale. This is my mother's death certificate. Faked. Her land was taken under threat, her life dismantled by this man, and tonight I'm taking it back." Flashes burst from the crowd, phones rose, the media, drawn like sharks to blood. "Maya," Ernesto hissed, stepping closer, "this is slander. I'll destroy you." "You already tried," she said, "and you failed." A new voice rang out. "I can confirm everything she's saying." It was Elise. She walked calmly down the aisle, a manila folder in hand, her eyes cold and clear. "This file contains documents of multiple illegal adoptions orchestrated by Hale Enterprises, including one you used to cover your wife's miscarriage by replacing your biological son with a child from Open Heart Orphanage." Gasps echoed through the hall. Brandon stood frozen. "You knew?" Maya asked quietly. Elise nodded. "It's why I never said yes." Ernesto's face twisted. "You're all insane. None of this will hold in court." "Oh, but it will," said another voice. From the side entrance, two uniformed officers stepped into the spotlight. One held a warrant, the other held cuffs. "Ernesto Hale," the lead officer announced. "You're under arrest for fraud, document forgery, illegal seizure of land, and unlawful confinement." Ernesto stumbled back. You can't." But Brandon stepped forward. "You had a choice, Father, years ago. You chose lies." Ernesto turned to him, betrayed. "I gave you everything." "No," Brandon said, his voice breaking. "You gave me a name that wasn't mine, a life built on silence. But the one thing I had left was the truth, and now I'm giving it back to the people you stole from." The officers cuffed him as flashes popped like fireworks. Maya didn't cry. She didn't shake. She stood tall, her mother's name cleared, her family's dignity reclaimed, and her voice finally heard. The headlines the next morning did what Maya's voice alone never could. Tech mogul Ernesto Hale arrested in land theft scandal. Whistleblower Maya Ortega exposes billion-dollar fraud. Heir renounces Hale legacy, declares new foundation for orphaned youth. In every news outlet, on every screen, the truth spread. Loud, public, and irreversible, the Hale tech empire began to crumble. Contracts were frozen. Investors pulled out. Civil suits multiplied overnight. And buried in a back-page editorial from a small Aurora newspaper was a line that hit harder than any headline. For 20 years, no one asked what happened to Maya Ortega's mother. Today, everyone knows. Emilia Ortega was no longer a ghost. She was real, alive, free. Her reunion with Maya had taken place not under spotlights, but in the quiet comfort of Xavier's workshop the morning after the arrest. No cameras. No reporters. Just a mother's hands trembling as she touched her daughter's face for the first time in 2 decades. "I never stopped looking for you," Emilia whispered, voice brittle but determined. "They said if I tried, they'd hurt you. But I kept the papers, the photo, the ring." Maya gripped her mother's hand, the sapphire catching the morning light like a promise finally kept. "I know," she said. "I feel like I've been carrying your strength all these years." Brandon stood nearby, silent. He had filed the paperwork that morning to legally renounce the Hale name. No fanfare, no press conference. He took back his birth name, Brandon Ortega, a man no longer defined by wealth or fraud, but by truth, however uncomfortable it might be. "You're sure about this?" Maya asked, watching him as he filled up the last signature. Brandon looked up at her, then at Emilia, and finally at Xavier, the man who had given Maya the love and shelter his own childhood had lacked. "For the first time in my life," Brandon said softly, "I know who I am." They built something after that. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fast, but it was real. 6 months later, the Oliva Foundation opened its doors, named after Emilia's maiden name, dedicated to supporting displaced children, reuniting fractured families, and offering legal support to victims of fraudulent adoption schemes and land seizure. The original Ortega property, once slated to become a luxury tech park, was transformed into a public environmental reserve. Trails wound through the land, marked with plaques honoring Maya's grandparents, her mother, and generations of stories that could no longer be erased. And at the center of it all stood a modest building, part community center, part workshop. Inside, Maya ran auto repair programs for teenagers who had been tossed aside by the system, kids who reminded her too much of herself at 16, covered in oil and silence. Brandon handled the foundation's legal team, using the same sharp mind that once closed billion-dollar deals to now reopen sealed files and recover what was lost. They never defined what they were to each other. Not exactly. They didn't have to. Siblings in truth, survivors in spirit, builders of something better. One afternoon, as the sun sank low over the reserve, Maya sat outside the shop, sipping lemonade. Brandon joined her, flipping through a new batch of grant applications. "You ever think," she asked, "about what would have happened if your car hadn't broken down that day?" He laughed, shaking his head. "I think the universe had finally had enough of my father's lies." She smiled, then held up her hand. The ring still fit perfectly, still shimmered like it had something left to say. "That ring," Brandon said, "brought everything back. All the memories. The promises. The pain." "Not just the pain," Maya corrected. "Also the truth." Amelia joined them moments later, setting down a tray of warm cornbread. She looked 10 years younger, her eyes brighter, her shoulders straighter. "Everything's changed," she said, settling into the chair beside her daughter. "Not everything," Maya replied. "We're still here, together." They sat in silence for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun, the smell of earth, and the laughter of children in the distance fill the air. Then Brandon reached into his pocket and pulled out the small wooden bird carving. It was still chipped along one wing, still rough in places, but it had endured. He placed it gently on the table. "I think we should put this in the center hall," he said, "a reminder of where it all began." Maya touched the bird with 2 fingers, nodding slowly. "It started with a ring," she said, "but it ends with everything we reclaim." And perhaps that's the true heart of the story, that no empire, no matter how powerful, can erase the quiet, persistent force of the truth. That sometimes the most fragile bonds, a carved bird, a childhood promise, a sapphire ring, are the ones strong enough to pull entire legacies back into the light. Justice isn't always loud, but when it arrives, it rewrites everything. The past doesn't define us, the choices we make after learning the truth do. And sometimes, what saves a broken world is something as simple as a ring on the right hand.